Welcome to an hour of Healthmade Radio. Healthmade is a community for natural health seekers where we educate people about common health conditions and share extensive research on the most effective natural health treatments and promote legislation that protects our health freedoms. A core concept belief is in the innate intelligence and healing power of the body, and if properly supported spiritually, emotionally, and nutritionally, it can find its way back to health. Healthmade Radio will bring you information from integrative health experts throughout the world. Check us out at healthmade.co. Health is what you make it. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt, and I will be your host. Today's guest is Dr. Lindsay Berkson. Dr. Berkson began her clinical practice in the late 1970s and her lecture career in training physicians of all modalities at the same time. She's recognized as one of the pioneers of functional medicine. She has taught, written, and researched the role of nutrition in healthcare with an emphasis on digestion, hormones, and female health. Her original book, Healthy Digestion, The Natural Way, was used to train physicians by the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, the largest training body of integrative MDs reaching 120 countries. This book was one of the first books to highlight the role of the gut in the body, mind, spirit, and medicine realms. She's respected for connecting the dots of diverse research as well as participating in original research published in peer-reviewed journals. And she's appreciated for combining smart plus heart. Dr. Berkson designed the first natural nutraceutical for menopause, Fem-Estro, and the first line of natural products for physicians to nutritionally support diverse female conditions, Femline by Metagenics. She worked in the first multidisciplinary clinic in the U.S., the Center for Orthomolecular Medicine in Palo Alto in the early 1980s. Her emphasis is the functional approach to healthcare. This focuses on identifying and addressing the root cause of illness as contrasted to the allopathic perspective that often emphasizes medications for symptom management. She's the author of several books, including Safe Hormones, Smart Women, Hormone Deception, and Sexy Brain. Dr. Berkson supports an integrative approach emphasizing collaboration where doctors work together as a team to help the patient get off meds, if possible, that is, and also get well, stay well. Today, it takes a village to keep us well. Well, Dr. Berkson, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show today, and your book, Sexy Brain, it truly intrigued me. Tell me a little bit, why did you write that book?
You know, it's funny. I got an email today. You know, we're going to do the shows tonight, and I got an email today. Almost every day I get an email from someone who just read the book. And she wrote, "Dear Dr. Berkson, I'm never going to think about intercourse the same way again."
I love it.
Because in this book, I show why nature wants us to make love, how making love protects your brain. I write books on digestion and hormones. So I got hired a few years ago by a surgeon and a urologist and a group of investors that were going to open up 100 low testosterone centers, which I think by now they've done. And they came to me and said, we want a coffee table book for the reception area on hormones. And as I was working on this book with their docs, they started opening the first clinics, and they thought they would mostly be serving 60 and 70 or maybe 50-year-old men with erectile dysfunction. And what they were getting walking into the door were these early 20s, middle 20s-year-old guys not wanting just bigger and better sex life, but actually having dysfunction. And when they measured their hormones, their testosterone levels were like the levels of 70-year-old guys.
That's incredible.
And they were just so struck. They were just couldn't believe that this was now the cohort or the population they were serving was more younger than older guys. And at the same time, in my personal practice, which centers a lot on female health, women are coming in their 20s and in the privacy and sacred space of my office saying, you know, I really love my mate and I really respect him, but I just wish we didn't have to make love. I I just don't want to make love. I don't want to be touched. And I started noticing that more and more people didn't feel comfortable with connection. And so I started to dive into the sexuality scientific literature because all of this was kind of going crazy for me. And plus I was working on that book for these 100 low T clinics. And I started seeing that there was all kinds of elegant sex science showing that the more that you do it, with the more big O's you have, orgasms, the less big A, Alzheimer's you have. So the more big O, the less big A. And that hormones rule the brain, but there was a lot of science showing that people are connecting less and less. There's a lot more androgyny and transgender issues. There's all kinds of identity things going around. And when I was a hormone scholar at Tulane, there was a lot of discussion about gender bending of hormone chemicals, pollutants in the air. Tyrone Hayes is a professor from Berkeley who is famous for his atrazine studies where he could take pregnant frogs and expose them to gender-bending, endocrine-disrupting chemicals and make the babies born to those moms that were pregnant come out hermaphroditic. And he could alter their sexuality based on the chemicals they were exposed to. So all of this information is coming in, and it's just kind of mind-boggling. And I started to sit down for about a year and plow through this literature, and I came up with some theories that I didn't know I would ever see the light like this. And I started to realize that hormones rule the brain, especially the area of the brain I call your physiologic analogy of your soul, your hippocampus. And in fact, the best study that we have ever reducing the incidence of Alzheimer's disease, looking at people prospectively, are the Cash, Utah studies, where they took people without dementia and followed them into the future to see who got it and why. And women who'd been on estrogen for at least 10 years had a 50% reduced incidence of Alzheimer's disease because estrogen protects the hippocampus in the brain. And so I started to realize that when we hug and when we connect with our children, when we're part of a community, and when we make love up in the boudoir, we release hormones, estrogen, testosterone, oxytocin. And nature never does anything without a purpose. So nature is all about taking care of the human race. And as we connect, we release hormones that protect our brain so that we'll be better parents and we'll be a better race and we'll have a safer potential future. But at the same time, we live in a dirty planet where we sit in a building with carpets outgassing hormones that damage, pollutants that damage our hormones, and paint and plastics. And we're a plasticized world and an insecticide, pesticide world. And many of these chemicals are blocking the ability of these hormones to be produced or to protect our brain. So I felt like there was a book there. I didn't want to write a book on sex, and it isn't just about sex. It's about hormones and your brain and connection and what to do about protecting all of that in an environment that wants to castrate you. So I call it environmental castration, and how to protect your brain and your sex life. And since I've written this book, about once a day, I get emails from a woman who'll say, my marriage was on the rocks. We were separated for 4 years. I asked my husband to go on a road trip, and I read your book out loud to him. One woman sent me a picture of her reading the book to her husband in the car on the road trip. And now they got back together again, because it shows you that nature wants you to have great sex. And if you don't you're relieved not to have it, you probably haven't had great sex. And great sex does turn your brain on. You want a sexy brain because your brain's run by sex steroid hormones. That's why I call it that name. So that's how that book came to be. It was like nature wanted me to write this book.
Well, I think it's such an important subject because I love the what you discussed about the gender bending, because it's becoming such an issue where people are confused with who they are. And because of that, it makes it harder for them to feel connected. And I think it's that connection in community that is what allows us then to be able to feel closer and want to have intimacy. And it's that natural intimacy. I mean, we're created in such a way to support the creation of the next generation, to continue existing. And that is just how nature works. So in order to be able to support and this connection with our community, it's important to know who you are and to and not jump from one circle to another, but really feel solid in that community. And a part of that is having intimacy with somebody that you really love.
Well, you know, it's interesting because now we've got Tinder and Bumble and Match. And so my young patients are coming in and they're telling me, well, you swipe left, you swipe right, you do all this stuff. And people are so much more objectified. And with porn's like a regular part of all kids' lives. My neighbor was a deacon in a Mormon church, and I asked him what was the most challenging. He led the youth group, people up to 22 years of age. And he said their addiction to porn. Even in that community, it's part of life, and it dehumanizes. And with hookups, one woman showed me on a Tinder that a guy said, swipe left if you don't have a great big butt. And it was like, I mean, it's just incredible what's now gone on in the community of connecting. And I guess there's some of that that's investigational and explorational, but we have lost somewhat of our intention and desire and ability to connect on a real, authentic human level. And that's when you release those hormones. Studies where a woman fakes an orgasm when they do blood levels of oxytocin, which is the feel-good hormone and a hormone that nature intends you to really feel good in yourself and your life. If she fakes the orgasm versus if she has it with someone she loves and respects, she'll make 300 times more oxytocin with someone she loves and respects, and a lot less if she fakes it or if she makes love with the one she's with if she's by herself. So nature really wants you to authentically connect. And that was stupefying to me to write this book and unveil that what I felt is one of nature's ways to keep the human race going.
That's incredible. We're just going to take a quick little break. I want to talk a little bit more about the hormone oxytocin, because it's such an important hormone. I don't think the listeners quite understand what it does and how important it is. You're listening to Healthmade Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm your host, and I'm here today with Dr. Lindsay Berkson talking about sexy brain. Welcome back to Healthmade Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. We are here with Dr. Lindsay Berkson, and I'm really excited to hear about this hormone oxytocin. We were talking about being connected and the importance of making love to somebody that you're really connected to and you really love, versus just somebody that you swiped right or left on some kind of dating site.
Well, you know, we think of oxytocin as the cuddle chemical, and we know that women make more oxytocin when they orgasm than men, and that's why women bond more, because it's a bonding hormone. But oxytocin is so much more than just the orgasm hormone. And nature, as I said in the last segment, never does anything without a reason. So oxytocin is really, besides progesterone and estriol being the pregnancy hormones, oxytocin is the birthing hormone. And it's a contractile hormone. So the signals help the uterus contract to push out the baby in birth, and it helps the breast contract to let down milk. But the baby is flushed with oxytocin because the mother's body is flushed to help those things happen. And it turns out that we have oxytocin receptors where oxytocin delivers its signals all throughout our body, but especially in the digestive tract, which is our gut is our mothership of our health. And when the baby is first born, this is my own read on all of the literature, by the way, So when the baby is first born, the gut is very susceptible to shock. It just enters the world, brand new, and the gut just has never been outside of that precious womb. And the baby is flushed with oxytocin. It turns out that oxytocin protects the little teeny precious villi and crypts from shock. Oxytocin is a gut wall protector. It is a leaky gut protector. And I now lecture to medical docs and pharmaceutical pharmacists and talk about the clinical applications of oxytocin for gut health. If you go to PubMed and you Google the literature and you put in oxytocin, there's 30 to 60 articles coming out each month on clinical application or trials of oxytocin because it's such a profound hormone. It reduces pain in the body, mind, spirit level. So there's studies that talk about the use of oxytocin to make us more socially comfortable. There's studies to reduce migraine pain. There's studies where it reduces post-hemorrhagic, postpartum hemorrhage. It's used in sciatic pain. It's used in so many different ways. It's extraordinary. Why wouldn't the first hormone that the baby is totally flushed by the birth process not be an extraordinary hormone to make you feel right with your world, your brand new world? And in an adult, we produce oxytocin every 2 to 3 minutes if we're healthy, but it leans on nutrients, like it's very dependent on vitamin C and zinc and magnesium. And I have this in the book. I have a chapter on oxytocin, and I give patient examples of how I've used it with certain patients. But it is a hormone of making us feel right in our skin. And there's a lot of discussion now starting to come out in the literature that hormone-altering chemicals are disrupting the ability of oxytocin to signal in the normal way that it can, and it's creating more of depression, anxiety, angst, because it is a hormone that keeps us feeling good, and as it can't signal, it's supposed to signal in men and women at all ages. It's not just a birthing hormone, but that's what it's known for. We tend to have more emotional angst. And so it's been in studies linking it to protecting us, for example, from so many things that are shocking, like diabetes. Your islets of your beta cells and your islets of Langerhans that make your insulin, they have incredible numbers of receptors for oxytocin. And oxytocin is being given to anorexics to reduce their fear of food and keep their cortisol levels healthier. It's being looked at every which way because it's nature's first major hormone that the first baby is exposed to. And when we make love with someone we really love and respect, we make more oxytocin than we do at any other time of the day. So it's a gift of that human connection to keep the rest of our biological real estate healthy.
There's just so many questions that are popping through my head as you're talking. So first, try to do it methodically here.
I'm walking around my living room in front of my fireplace. I'm having fun with you.
Good. I love it. So one issue you're talking about during the birthing process, because one thing that is crucial, I believe, is that initial connection with the baby to the mother. And so during the birthing process, those muscles, they're then flushed with the oxytocin, and the baby is exposed to that, and that will then enhance that connection between the two. But then if you would cheat that process, you put then the mother on some kind of a pain medication to reduce the contractions, and also you would maybe do a cesarean so the baby would not pass through the birth canal, then would that impact the amount of oxytocin that baby is exposed to, and will that then reduce the connection between the baby and the mother?
I haven't seen any studies linking cesarean birth with alterations in oxytocin. I just haven't seen any, so I don't know what they might find if they look. But there are a number of studies growing to take a look at Pitocin, which is oxytocin given in the hospital when they feel like they need to urge the birth on, but it's given in a different way because normal oxytocin, as I just said, is pulsed out. It's pulsed. And when women have been getting Pitocin in the hospital, it's a continuous drip. And there's discussion that this alteration, that rhythm is as much part of the signal as anything else, and that it makes the oxytocin receptors damaged, and that might be contributing. They're looking at the kids that have been exposed to Pitocin at birth have a higher incidence of cognitive and social behavior issues like bipolar disease and psychiatric disorders because their oxytocin receptors have been damaged. But we now know that you can reboot a damaged receptor by oxytocin replacement. But they're starting to look at all these things. They know that skin on skin, when a mother holds the baby, that the baby and the mother both make more oxytocin and less cortisol because the baby is stressed out by being brand new in this world. More oxytocin tamps down the stress hormone cortisol, and they've measured the levels in the dad and other members of the family. And as the mother's oxytocin and the baby's oxytocin goes up, the other family members' oxytocin goes up. You don't even have to be touching each other. You're just all connected energetically, and it influences, it's extraordinary. And it influences your oxytocin levels. And moms that have more skin-on-skin time have less complications of pregnancy. Dates are the one food that upregulate oxytocin receptors. So there have been a lot of studies in populations that consume a lot of dates, like in Egypt and Syria, and they've measured the amount of dates that a pregnant mom consumes and her risk of complications of birth and so forth. And women who eat more dates have a lot less complications because they make a lot more oxytocin, or their receptors are more functional. We talked on the other show that we did about receptor functionality. So oxytocin influences the people in your sphere, not just who you are actually touching. It's so extraordinary. It is the human hormone of connection, and now we're learning that wherever there's receptors for a hormone, that hormone has some kind of action. Well, there's receptors throughout the gut. There's receptors in the pancreas. There's receptors in the liver. There's no receptors in the gallbladder. But this is from Scandinavian studies where they took little snippets of gut tissue and measured messenger RNA of receptors for oxytocin in people's digestive tract and found it everywhere. So we're now using oxytocin replacement instead of proton pump inhibitors for esophageal reflux. And it's just extraordinary what oxytocin can do because nature made this one of the first most powerful hormones, and we're just in the beginning of understanding the breadth of how we can use this clinically to make people healthier.
So it's almost then like if the mother and the father, if they have that close relationship, they have a lot of intimacy, then that the oxytocin that's produced, then from that will impact the rest of the family to make their gut healthier, to make their liver healthier, to make their whole digestive and pancreas, blood sugar regulation, all of that healthier just from intimacy and from closeness.
You know, the Scandinavians are very cool about and very open-minded about sex and what's going on in life, and they published in it's called Psychologica Nordica, I think is the name of the journal. And as a country, they were concerned because a lot of their families were separating before the first child was not even 5 years old. So the country hired Gothenburg University to track a large number of couples, I think it was close to 70, for a number of years to see who stayed together and who didn't and why. And it turned out, and they described this in this journal, the scientific journal, that the couples that had the best sex and communication and orgasms, and that meant out of the bedroom as well as in the bedroom, and they were really kind of always making oxytocin as a family, they were the couples that stayed together and had less trouble. So the Swedish government is recommending courses before people move in together to learn how to stay connected so that the child will be healthier in a connected family, and a country is only as healthy as its family units. So I thought, wow, what a sophisticated thing to do. And that came out just a little bit before I was publishing Sexy Brain, so I was able to discuss literature like that and lots of other literature in the book that's actually just mind-boggling and so helpful to understand how to have a healthier relationship with the opposite sex when we're really biologically wired diversely. So I kind of tackle that in the book, too. You could think of Sexy Brain as a manual for your kids who are about to embark on a serious relationship to help them have a tool bag with which to make that relationship have a better chance of success and less stress.
That's fascinating. We're going to take a quick break. You're just getting amazing gems here from Dr. Lindsay Berkson. You're listening to Healthmade Radio. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. You're listening to Healthmade Radio, and you're here with Dr. Lindsay Berkson. We're talking about Sexy Brain. So, yeah, we're recognizing how important this connection is, and actually, I'm not sure if you knew, but I'm actually from Sweden. So
I didn't know that.
No.
I didn't know that. I knew you had this lovely accent, but I didn't know where it was from.
Well, thank you. And
That's funny.
And it's actually I haven't heard the research you were talking about, so I'm just fascinated that it was instigated by Sweden, but I guess it would make sense because their family unit is so small, and they really because they only have like 1.2 children for a couple.
I wonder what that 0.2 child looks like.
Yeah, that 0.2. I really feel sorry. I'm sorry. We just gave birth to a toe. That's all we got.
I'm laughing so much I have to turn my fire down here.
Yeah. So, but in regards to, so we're talking about the oxytocin and all the things that you can do then to maximize that, and it seems to be such an integral part. So we're talking about dates. You can eat dates, and that will increase oxytocin and obviously closeness and intimacy. Are there other ways that you can increase that to maximize the connection that you have with the people around you?
Well, you can, in the morning when you know how in Sweden people do the cold water dive. They go from hot water to cold water or sauna to cold water. In the morning, if you take your shower and at the end you let it go to cold and you put your face in the cold water, splashing cold water on your face increases your production of oxytocin. And in the clinic, you can write a prescription to be made by a compounding pharmacist, and you can give it. In academia, most of the research is done through nasal spray, but they also use it's called vagitocin. It's a vaginal delivery for women who are high-risk women and feel like they can't take estrogen, and they can take oxytocin gel or cream, and it has very estrogen-like activity on the vaginal vault, but it doesn't signal the estrogen receptor. It's not an estrogen agonist. So you can so those are all called delivery modes. You can deliver it up the nose. You can put it topically for pain in a cream. You can take it vaginally, and you can also take it orally as a lozenge or as a dissolvable tablet. If you want it to stick to some component in the digestive tract where it can do some of its magic, it can be adhered by a compounding pharmacist to a muco-adherent liquid. And, it's a happening hormone right now in terms of all of its potential applications, but it doesn't work for everybody. Some of my patients take oxytocin and really feel like their sugar cravings go down. It's very good at reducing sugar cravings, and it helps in human male studies. Men that take it before eating reduce their caloric intake, so some people are using it with weight loss. But it doesn't work for everybody. And some of the reasons why is that it leans on very specific nutrients and that a lot of the hormones function as a family. So if you go to a doctor and you say, can you test my testosterone? And they just test your testosterone. It doesn't do anything because you have this huge hormonal family. And if some of the other hormones that this hormone leans on are low, but you didn't test for that, you don't know that, you might not get the bang for the replacement of that hormone. So that's why in Sexy Brain, I give a list of all the hormones you should test at one time to do a really good job of it. But for example, oxytocin leans a lot on estrogen and thyroid function. So if you're older and you're not on estrogen, it won't work as well. If you're a guy and you don't have enough estrogen, it won't work as well. If you're hypothyroid, it won't work as well. So there's a bigger picture of oxytocin functioning with nutrients and other hormonal family members. And that's the picture I'm always trying to teach to doctors and then to patients to demand of doctors is this bigger picture, that hormones aren't just a blood test. They have to go into a satellite dish that is waiting for it to deliver its email, and that satellite dish needs to have nutrients. And then there have to be other hormones that are working well, and it's this bigger picture. So if you went to somebody who really knew what they were doing, they'd look at all of that, but you might go to a typical doctor. You just get tested for one thing, you get one script, you try it out, it didn't do anything for you, when you might have been deficient in some of the cofactors that were necessary to make it do its magic. But still, not one thing works for everybody, and that there's no guarantee, but it's best if you know someone who could give you every possible chance of getting success if they knew that bigger picture.
So you're mentioning that the estrogen, even for men, then were important for the oxytocin to function.
Right.
How do you? I know there are a lot of men out there that'll be a little bit nervous about taking estrogen and thinking.
No, it's not that they're supposed to take estrogen, but if a man is going to go get his testosterone checked, you have to get your estrogens checked.
Yes.
You should look at your estrone and estradiol, and they should be in a healthy ratio to each other. And if a man has too much weight on him or he drinks too much beer, those are all estrogenic. He might have much more estrogen than his male hormones, and he's kind of getting feminized. Estrogen is needed to protect the man's heart. Estrogen is needed to protect his epigenetics. Estrogen is needed to make his oxytocin work well, so you don't want him to have no estrogen. And in some men, we recommend usually facial creams. If they're very insufficient in estrogen or very excessive in the male hormones, we might give a facial cream with a little bit of estriol, the weakest estrogen, and some progesterone, and maybe a little bit of testosterone that we have them take as a facial cream. So we do sometimes give hormones to men, but they're in very tiny amounts. And often a man will feel hesitant, but then he feels so much better from getting it that it's striking. Now, the compounding pharmacy I was using for that is in Washington, and I'm in Texas, and they used to ship it here, but Texas laws just made it very restrictive for compounding pharmacies in other states to ship here. So we just got a letter that compounding pharmacy isn't going to ship here anymore. So now I've got to find a place here in town that will learn how to do it, because this is not something that a lot of compounding pharmacies know about. But all of us need all of the hormones, but men just have them in different ratios, and men have more male hormone, women have more female hormone, but we all need each of the hormones, and they all function and dysfunction together. So that's now the new understanding of hormones, is there's a real tapestry of how they work, and then the outer environment can sabotage them. So there's even a bigger tapestry of how the planet gets in on our hormones. And that's just redefining them by understanding the context in our body and the context within our planet.
So in order to then maximize the sexy brain, I mean, we need to then optimize the levels of our hormones. And they, like you mentioned, they all work together. We need to also have a lifestyle to promote the oxytocin, so we have that connectedness in that way. And then also we need to then work on the receptors, which are then clogged up by chemicals and things, and they might be deficient in certain nutrients, so that these hormones can land somewhere and stimulate the cells and get an action going. What else what else can we do? I mean, what should we eat? What should we? Are there plants? Are there herbs? Are there specific nutrients? You mentioned zinc,
yeah, I
magnesium.
do go into that in the book, nutrients and so forth. But one of the big things is learning how to live a connected life. Even if you're solo, you don't have to. You can. One of my favorite things to do is to go to the post office, because I almost always time it where I have to open the door for somebody, and then somebody else has to open the door for me. And before you know it, we've got a little cameo routine going on of thank you, how are you today, and a little thing, and you've just like plucked up each other's oxytocin. And I look to in the bathroom when I'm in line at the airport or at a restaurant, and where women are standing in line to go to the stalls. I usually start a conversation, and I create a connecting moment, even with somebody who's not in my tribe. I try to live with an intention, a connected life. And that secretes out a little bit of oxytocin throughout my day. It makes life much more enjoyable. You kind of pass forward goodwill. I was just pulling up to a stop sign yesterday, and two women were just about ready to step off the curb. And normally the car would just go because people aren't kind to each other anymore here. And I waved them to walk in front of my car. I didn't want to be in a hurry. There were two women out for a stroll, and I put my window down, and I said, there's not enough graciousness in the world, and I just felt like all three of us just having a gracious moment. And they laughed, and I laughed, and they said, we're going to go pass this forward. They said that, and we all fluffed up our oxytocin, and I live a life with intention of connection, and I have a whole chapter on connection in Sexy Brain, because people are always wanting a food and they're wanting an herb, and I do go into those things. Mm-hmm. But if you can have an intention, not just be distracted by just the close people in your life, but you are a member of the humanity, of mankind and womankind, and you don't have to do this all the time. Sometimes you're in a rush, but it enriches your life with your hormones, with your psyche, and it makes other people feel like there's a little bit more hope. Yeah. Because in this world today now, for some reason, we're trigger happy with anger. And we need culturally to boost up our oxytocin. So I remind people in my radio show to take intentions to have at least one moment a day where you have this creative, it just emerges from what shows up on the plate in front of you in your life, and you create in each other some oxytocin.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, but I love, since you're putting such emphasis on the connectiveness, and I know that is something that we as a humanity struggle with. I want to expand a little bit more on that when we come right back. We'll just take a quick break. Welcome back to Healthmade Radio. You're listening to Dr. Michael Karlfeldt, and I'm here today with Dr. Lindsay Berkson, author of Sexy Brain. You were talking, most of us nowadays, I mean, we just do want to take a pill, and we want to have a quick fix. What kind of food should I eat? What kind of nutrient? Give me some L-arginine or Yohimbe or whatever that may be, to fix the issues that I have. But you want to go even beyond that, which is what lays the foundation of who we are and what drives our hormones, which is that connection. And what can be, you're mentioning some ideas, like being in an environment where you can be with people and just have that little graciousness and open the door for someone and say something nice to someone to balance out all that. You're right. All that anger that seems to be out there.
Like if you think about bones, so medicine has traumatized women about their bones. We have osteoporosis. We have to be scared to death. We're going to end up to just be a puddle of liquid, calcium on the floor, liquid on the floor with no bone structure. We're just, there's a lot of medicine today that's traumatic. And we think of strengthening your bones as only calcium, or milk, with the real successful commercials of the mustache of milk and, good bones need milk. It turns out that in Minnesota at this osteoporosis clinic, they've discovered that emotions had more power over the matrix that holds minerals in the bone to give bones strength and tensile strength too, and that fear and anger, and these are all very acidic emotions that damage bones, and that they were more powerful than even the minerals. And so we don't realize how much our perspective on our life influences our inhabiting our own bodysuit. And so I talk about connection in the book. I talk about what women can do to men to be more connected, and what men can do to women to be more connected. I had a advisor for this book. He's Michael Baker. He's a scientist from UC San Diego, and he writes most of the textbooks for medical schools on estrogen. He started going deep into how the very first hormone on 40,000 years ago, very first hormone on the planet, how it came to be, and how we're biologically wired, estrogen to testosterone, so hardwired that we are different, and what that looks like. So I wrote up his work in a comedic, real easy to understand way, and then translate that into connecting with each other and in the bedroom. So this book goes into a number of spaces about connection, from the hormones to the psyche, that really help us have a happier life, and put it down in paper where you can read it and read it again and read it again. So it's a tool bag of connection, and why nature wants you to have connection, and how to protect connection from a toxic world. So it's looking at connection from every which way. And hormones are part of that, and I go into that. But it's like this bigger picture of all the portals that influence connection, and why nature wants us to stay connected for the future safety of our race. So I didn't know I was going to write this book. It took 3 years to write, and most people say it's a real easy read, but it goes into these places that you wouldn't normally think it would go into, and you come out having such a different perspective on intercourse, on human gracious connection, on, of course, that's why it's so difficult to connect with that person. That's why relationships are, love them and you hate them. And I go into that, why, and how to rise above that, yet still honor our biological drivenness. So that's what this book evolved into. And it's a fun read, and a kind of a quick page turner, even though it's not thick science where you have to put on your mucklucks and wade through it. So,
and what for people, say you have a couple that's going through a struggle, they're not able to kind of really connect the way that they would like to, and they're starting to drift apart. What would you suggest to them, other than obviously they do need to get your book ASAP? But what are some of the kind of gems in that book as to what they can do to reverse the trend that they're in right now?
Well, in the chapter that discusses how estrogen and testosterone first evolved, I show why we have these pitfalls in communication and in frustration with each other because we're wired so differently. And then I say, so our brain makes us do it. This is what you can then do or consider. So I give why you get caught between a rock and a hard place. And then I give you a consideration for the guy to look at it like this and do this, and the woman to look at him like this and do that. So I literally take you through circumstances and how to fix it.
Because it's always that frustration. Always the frustration that, a woman never feel listened to. A man